My son forgot to hang up the phone. I heard it's time for her to go to a nursing home. She's a burden. I didn't say anything, but at that moment, something in me broke. I sold the house for $890,000. They came back from a business trip smiling, but there was a surprise waiting for them. The keys did not fit the door. They found a note on the doorstep, and after reading it, they started screaming. And then I realized they wouldn't just leave it alone. This was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The phone rang just as I was scraping the last of the pot roast from my plate. Thomas's pot roast recipe, though mine never tasted quite right without his touch. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled despite myself. "Mom, how are you holding up?" Marcus's voice carried that familiar warmth that always made my chest tighten with love and loneliness. I settled into Thomas's old recliner, the leather worn smooth from years of his evening reading sessions. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished dinner and was about to watch the news." I didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that I'd been staring at Thomas's photo on the mantel for the better part of an hour. "Are you eating enough? You know, you can always order groceries online now, right? I showed you the app." "I'm eating plenty," I interrupted gently, though I had a little scare yesterday. Forgot to turn off the burner under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it burning from the living room. There was a pause. I could picture him frowning in that way he'd inherited from his father. The same little crease between his eyebrows. "Mom, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly." "I'm fine, Marcus. Really? How's your business trip going? You're in Dallas, right?" "Yes, the conference ends tomorrow. Jessica's been handling most of the client meetings while I sit through these endless presentations about digital marketing trends." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Listen, Mom, I should probably get going. Jessica and I have dinner plans with some potential investors." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Mom. Take care of yourself, okay?" I heard a click, then rustling sounds. He must have dropped the phone in his pocket, I thought, reaching to hang up my end. But then I heard voices, muffled but clear enough through his phone's microphone. "Jessica, you see how she's deteriorating?" Marcus's voice, no longer warm and caring. "She forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if she burns the house down?" My hand froze on the receiver. I spread through my chest. "It's time for a nursing home, Marcus." Jessica's voice, cold and matter-of-fact. "She's becoming a burden, and you know it. Your mom's a good woman, but she can't live alone anymore. The house is worth almost $1 million now." Marcus's tone had shifted to pure calculation. "With Atlanta's market, we could probably get 900,000, maybe more." "Exactly." Jessica sounded pleased. "We could sell it, put her somewhere decent, not too expensive, and finally buy that house in Buckhead we've been looking at, the one with the skyline view." My son laughed. Actually laughed. "God, Jessica, you should have seen her tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. She has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused she'll get. We should strike while she still trusts us completely." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor Thomas and I had installed together 23 years ago. Every board laid by my own hands, every nail driven with thoughts of our family's future. I sat in the sudden silence of my empty house, staring at Thomas's photograph. His eyes seemed to bore into mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, warning, or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who've already left this world. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Thomas's anniversary gift to me 15 years ago, ticked steadily in the growing darkness. Outside, the first spring crickets began their evening song in the garden Thomas had planted and I still tended. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt hearing my son's voice just moments before. My hands, weathered from decades of construction work, slowly curled into fists. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded. They were already spending my money, already planning their new life in my grave. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, Thomas's face watching me from the silver frame on the end table. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my son's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt unsteady when I finally stood to turn on the lamp. The warm light fell across the living room we'd furnished piece by piece. Each item chosen with care and saved for with sacrifice. The burgundy sofa where Marcus used to curl up doing homework. The coffee table I'd built in the garage, sanding it smooth while he played at my feet. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept old receipts and papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without conscious thought. 20 years of financial records I'd never thrown away because Thomas always said, "You never know when you might need them." Morehouse College tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years. I remembered those double shifts, coming home with sawdust in my hair and plaster under my fingernails. Thomas would have coffee waiting and would massage my shoulders while I paid bills at this very kitchen table. "Lorraine, you're working yourself to death," he'd said one night, watching me calculate how to afford Marcus's spring semester. "He deserves better than we had, Thomas. He's smart enough for anything." Thomas had kissed the top of my head. "Just don't give him so much that he forgets to be grateful." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding receipts were in there too. $32,000 for one day. I told Marcus we could afford 5,000, maybe 8 if we stretched, but he'd cried, actually cried, about wanting his dream wedding. I'd worked weekends for 6 months installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me under the table. "Mama, you're the best mother in the world," he'd whispered during our dance, his head on my shoulder, his tuxedo crisp against my dress. I'll never forget this. But he had forgotten. Just like he'd forgotten who co-signed his first car loan when his credit wasn't good enough. Just like he'd forgotten who made the calls to get him that marketing job when he was unemployed for 8 months after graduation. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago after Jessica lost her financial advisor position for reasons they never fully explained. They'd moved in temporarily, just until Jessica found something new. I'd never charged them rent. I'd paid the increased utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of one lonely widow. Jessica would pat my shoulder and call me the most generous woman in Georgia. Marcus would hug me and say, "Mom, we'll pay you back when we get on our feet." They'd been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both making more money than I ever had. But they'd never mentioned moving out, never mentioned paying me back. The anniversary dinner I'd paid for last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown because Jessica said they deserved to celebrate. The car repair bill I'd covered when Jessica's BMW needed a new transmission, $3,000 that cleaned out my emergency fund. "Lorraine's like a mother to me," Jessica had told her friends at their last barbecue, her arm around my shoulders. "I'm so lucky to have married into this family." I'd been proud, actually proud, to be the generous mother-in-law, the woman who took care of her family no matter what it cost her. I walked upstairs to Thomas's and my bedroom, still unchanged after 2 years. His watch sat on the dresser, his reading glasses folded beside the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our important papers and pulled out our original house deed. Thomas and Lorraine Hayes, purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. My name only now that Thomas was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Thomas had spent his last days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass. But underneath it, something harder was forming. They wanted to put me away and sell my life's work. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for their attention to fight back. I looked at Thomas's photo on the nightstand, remembering his voice from all those years ago. "Don't give him so much that he forgets to be grateful." Well, Thomas, our son had definitely forgotten. But he was about to remember that his old mama wasn't as helpless as he thought. I walked to my home office and pulled out the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. Linda Martinez, real estate attorney. Thomas had insisted we meet with her after his cancer diagnosis, just to make sure our affairs were in order. It was time for another consultation. The next morning, I walked through my house like a stranger seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing home, I was seeing what Marcus and Jessica saw: square footage, market value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the granite countertop I'd installed myself, working by lamplight after my regular job because we couldn't afford to hire contractors. Thomas had picked out the pattern, speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning light. He'd made coffee on this counter every morning for 16 years, until the cancer took his strength away. I remembered the Christmas morning when 3-year-old Marcus took his first wobbly steps right here, from the refrigerator to Thomas's outstretched arms. We'd both cried with joy, Thomas scooping our son up and spinning him around while I scrambled for the camera. "Our baby's walking in our house," Thomas had whispered, tears streaming down his face. "In the house we built for him." The living room held 25 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 7-year-old Marcus's face lighting up at the sight of the model train set I'd spent 3 months building in the garage, working in secret after he'd gone to bed. Thomas had sewn tiny details for the landscape, made miniature buildings from cardboard and paint. "Mama, it's just like downtown Atlanta," Marcus had squealed. And it was. I'd made it a perfect replica, down to the little church that represented our family's place of worship. That bay window had cost me 6 months of overtime. Thomas had seen it in a magazine and fallen in love with the idea of reading there in the afternoons. I'd learned to cut angles I'd never cut before, measured and remeasured until my back ached from crawling around the frame. "Lorraine, we can't afford this," Thomas had worried when he saw me marking measurements on the wall. "You want it, you'll have it," I told him. "I'll make it work." I climbed the stairs to Marcus's old room, still painted the soft blue he'd chosen for his 16th birthday, still decorated with photos of his high school friends and college memories. The room where I'd rocked him through colicky nights as a baby, where Thomas and I had helped him with algebra homework at the small desk I'd built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Thomas's side of the bed still had his water glass on the nightstand, his bookmark still marking page 247 of the novel he'd never finish. I'd built these walk-in closets with my own hands, custom designed to fit Thomas's height perfectly. His clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of his cologne. This was the room where we'd planned our future, where we'd whispered about our dreams for Marcus, where Thomas had died holding my hand while machines beeped around us. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," he'd said near the end, his voice barely a whisper. "You're too good, Lorraine. Too generous. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I found the folder of construction photos Thomas had kept. Pictures of me laying the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. Me and my crew installing the frame. Thomas in his hard hat bringing us lemonade on hot summer days, his belly just starting to show with Marcus. The financial records from those years told the story Thomas's photos couldn't. Second mortgage. Personal loan from my brother. Thomas taking a part-time job at the school district to help with materials costs. We'd eaten beans and rice for months, drove cars held together with prayer and duct tape. But we'd built this house with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other and for the family we were creating. And now my son, the baby who'd taken his first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the yard I'd landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and put me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture. I picked up Linda Martinez's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Marcus and Jessica thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who'd be grateful for any scrap of attention they threw her. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Linda's number and listened to it ring, my hands steady as stone. Outside, the spring morning was bright and clear. The kind of day Thomas used to love, the kind of day for new beginnings. The law offices of Martinez and Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on Peachtree Street, the kind of place that specialized in helping regular people with real problems rather than impressing corporate clients. I'd chosen my best suit, the charcoal gray one Thomas had picked out for me to wear to his funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early, my hands only slightly trembling as I signed in at the reception desk. Linda Martinez was younger than I'd expected, maybe 55, with graying temples and the patient demeanor of a woman who'd heard every family horror story twice. Her office was lined with law books and family photos. A husband, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Thomas and I had tried to build. Mrs. Hayes, good to see you again. Linda poured coffee from a small machine in the corner, the rich smell filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. I remember you and Thomas from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I need to discuss something delicate about my son and daughter-in-law. Linda settled behind her desk, pen ready. I'm listening. I told her everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. Linda's expression never changed, but I caught her shaking her head slightly when I described their eagerness to spend my money on their Buckhead dream house. Unfortunately, Mrs. Hayes, this scenario is more common than you'd think. Linda set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name only since your husband's passing. Correct. That's right. Thomas and I owned it jointly, but when he died, it transferred to me automatically. Then, legally speaking, your son and daughter-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent. Linda pulled a legal pad from her drawer and began making notes. The house belongs to you. Period. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. So if I wanted to sell it myself? You could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision. Linda looked up from her notes. May I ask why you're considering that option? I thought about Marcus's laugh when he'd called me a burden, about Jessica's cold calculation of my worth, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Linda was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Atlanta's housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price. She paused. If you were serious about selling quickly, before your son and daughter-in-law return from their trip, how quickly could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less. Linda leaned forward. But Mrs. Hayes, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Ms. Martinez. Every board, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing. We spent the next hour discussing practicalities, market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Linda explained that she could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about proceeding. The consultation fee is $200, Linda said as I prepared to leave. If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale. I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my truck in the spring sunshine, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since his betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture him in some hotel lobby in Dallas, probably checking his watch, wondering why his grateful old mother wasn't jumping to answer his call. Let him wonder. Let him and Jessica make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my truck, Linda Martinez's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful son exactly who he was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew he'd call back. He always did when he needed something from the old woman. This time he was going to get much more than he bargained for. By the time I reached my driveway, confidence had replaced the tremor in my hands. Linda Martinez's words echoed in my mind. It's your property, your decision. 25 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like Atlanta fog in the morning sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Marcus's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since his betrayal, I smiled. Let him stew for a moment. Let him wonder why his grateful old mother wasn't scrambling to answer. I poured myself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the 6th ring. Mom, there you are. Marcus's voice practically sparkled with artificial enthusiasm. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands. I kept my tone warm, motherly. How's Dallas treating you? Oh, you know how these business conferences are. But listen, I have the most wonderful news. He paused for dramatic effect. Jessica and I have been planning something very special for you. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. Oh. We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Dad died. His voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognized as manipulation. There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me. Nonsense. Your family. Jessica's voice came through in the background. She must have been listening on speakerphone. We've already made all the arrangements. When were you thinking? I managed, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned to claim their inheritance. Well, we should be back by next Friday, Marcus said. We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials. The essentials. Not the photo albums Thomas had lovingly arranged. Not the furniture I'd built with my own hands. Just the essentials for an old woman being shuffled off to die. Actually, Marcus, I have a surprise for you too, when you get back. Oh, Mom, what kind of surprise? He sounded genuinely pleased, probably imagining I'd signed papers or made their job easier somehow. I walked to the bay window I'd built for Thomas, looking out at the garden he'd planted, the porch swing where we'd spent countless evenings planning our future. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Mom. We'll talk about everything when we get home, okay? Get some rest and we'll take care of everything else. Sweet. He called me sweet while planning to steal my life. I will, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Mom. See you Friday. The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed. Real estate agents, Atlanta. The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that methodical nature would serve a different purpose. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client testimonials like I used to compare structural steel suppliers. Cascade Heights, Buckhead, Druid Hills. Neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Marcus and Jessica were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in the top results. Michelle Stevens, 43 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaged 18 days from listing to closing. Her photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of woman who could make things happen fast. Her testimonials were exactly what I needed to see. Michelle sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, no complications. I stared at her direct phone number prominently displayed beneath her credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old woman my son expected. Thomas's photo on my desk seemed to be watching me. I could almost hear his voice. "Lorraine, are you sure about this?" I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything since his funeral. I dialed Michelle Stevens's number with steady fingers. Michelle Stevens, Stevens Real Estate. How can I help you? Ms. Stevens, my name is Lorraine Hayes. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can these things actually happen? Well, Mrs. Hayes, that depends on several factors, but with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with cash buyers. What kind of timeline are you looking at? 10 days? My heart hammered against my ribs. 10 days? That fast? Absolutely. Atlanta's market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your house? I looked around my kitchen, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first time. 2-story, 3,400 square feet, built in 1999, Cascade Heights area. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've maintained it well. Did most of the work myself over the years. Michelle's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, established neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3 o'clock. I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. 3 o'clock works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of my kitchen, the magnitude of what I'd set in motion beginning to settle in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Thomas and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively, old habits from Thomas's time when he'd insist the house be spotless for any visitor. I dusted the bay window, straightened the throw pillows on the couch, made sure every surface gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for an execution. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my shirt, took a deep breath that carried the scent of Thomas's cedar sachets still tucked in the linen closet, and walked toward the front door. My hand trembled slightly as it closed around the brass door knob I'd installed myself 15 years ago. Beyond this door waited either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and opened the door to my future. Michelle Stevens looked exactly like her photo. Professional but approachable, early 40s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. She carried a leather portfolio and tablet, and the moment she stepped inside, her eyes went wide. Wow! She stopped in my entryway, her gaze traveling up the crown molding I'd installed by hand to the hardwood floors Thomas and I had selected together. Mrs. Hayes, this is exactly what I was hoping for. I watched her take in the details. The way the afternoon light streamed through Thomas's bay window. The seamless flow from living room to dining room that I'd achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a beam. Her appreciation was genuine, professional. You weren't kidding about maintaining this place. She pulled out her tablet and started taking photos. These hardwood floors throughout, original. Installed them myself in 2001. Thomas wanted something that would last, so we went with 3/4-inch solid oak. I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing my work, proud despite everything that was happening. And this kitchen? Michelle stopped at the granite countertop, running her hand along the edge. Custom installation. Every inch. Thomas picked the pattern, said the gold veining reminded him of sunlight. My voice caught slightly. I spent 3 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Michelle was typing notes on her tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. Mrs. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm an engineer. Was an engineer. I believe in building things right the first time. It shows. She gestured toward the living room. May I? I nodded, following her as she admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, the way Thomas's decorating choices had turned our construction project into a home. This bay window, custom work. Built it for my husband. He wanted a reading nook. I could picture him there with his mystery novels and afternoon tea, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Michelle was taking measurements now, her excitement barely contained. Mrs. Hayes, I need to show you some comparable sales. She pulled up listings on her tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $850,000 to $920,000. My chest tightened. That was more than Marcus and Jessica had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition and custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $890,000. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar. $890,000. I sat down heavily in Thomas's reading chair, the number spinning in my head. That much. I managed. Mrs. Hayes, you're sitting on a gold mine. Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Michelle's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew her business. I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-quality rental properties in established neighborhoods. They pay cash. No financing contingencies. No repair negotiations. They can close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Marcus and Jessica would return from Dallas in 8 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable mother ready to be shipped off to their resort. What's the catch? Why so fast? Michelle smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your house is in better shape than most new construction I see. I looked around the living room where Marcus had taken his first steps, where Thomas and I had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons reading the paper together. When would I need to be out? Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork. I thought about Marcus's voice on the phone calling me sweet while planning to steal my life. I thought about Jessica's cold calculation reducing me to a burden to be managed. I thought about Thomas's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Michelle's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mrs. Hayes. Let me call them right now. I watched her dial, heard her describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Cascade Heights area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout. She ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting through Thomas's bay window, casting golden light across the room where I just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 9 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Michelle was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Thomas's 15th anniversary gift to me, ticked steadily in the silence. 9 a.m. sounds perfect. After Michelle left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, I stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through Thomas's windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was anticipation. Michelle arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone, the kind of professional efficiency I'd always respected. I read every line with a thoroughness that had made me a good engineer, checking details the way I used to check blueprints. Sale price: $890,000. Cash purchase. Closing date: 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough, and I can remain in the house for 30 days after closing if needed? That's correct, Mrs. Hayes. Though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind. I almost laughed. The only peace of mind I'd have would come from seeing Marcus and Jessica's faces when they discovered what their burden had done. I signed my name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through decades of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired my workmanship and found nothing to complain about. "Your husband really knew what he was doing," one of them said, assuming Thomas had done the construction. "These floors, this electrical work, all top quality." "Actually, I did most of it myself," I corrected gently. "Thomas helped with design choices." The inspector's eyebrows rose. "Even more impressive, ma'am." Days 4 through 6, I became a woman with a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere I could start over with nearly $900,000 in the bank. I found a place in Midtown, a senior community with walking trails and a community center, the kind of place Thomas and I had sometimes talked about for our golden years. I also called storage facilities, planning which of Thomas's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave for the new owners. His favorite books, definitely. His watch collection. The photo albums. The essentials of a life lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning I woke up knowing I was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing my son that his confused old mother was sharper than he'd ever imagined. Mr. Johnson from next door noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people. "Just some work being done," I told him, hating the half-truth but knowing the full truth would spread through the neighborhood before I was ready. On day 8, Michelle called with final confirmation. "Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mrs. Hayes. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately." That night, I packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Thomas's photo on our dresser and whispered, "I hope you understand what I'm doing." Friday morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of spring day Thomas used to say was Atlanta at its finest. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the funeral suit, but the navy one Thomas had bought me for Marcus's college graduation. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their attorney, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Michelle handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mrs. Hayes, if you'll sign here and here, initial there." Each signature felt like cutting a chain. The deed transfer. The settlement statement. The final acknowledgement that 1247 Magnolia Drive no longer belonged to Lorraine Hayes. "And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $890,000, less closing costs, has been deposited to your account." I stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. More money than Marcus and Jessica had dreamed their burden could access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Michelle walked me to my truck, promising to stay in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. "You made the right choice, Mrs. Hayes." Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need. I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school where Marcus had learned to read, past the church where Thomas and I used to attend service every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt liberation. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck, looking at the house that was no longer mine. The keys to the front door felt heavy in my palm. But tomorrow, I'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Marcus and Jessica were due back from Dallas in 3 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable mother ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my truck and walked toward my front door, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. I sat staring at the house I'd built with my own hands. The house that now belonged to strangers. The house where Marcus and Jessica expected to return and find their grateful, manageable mother waiting to be shipped off. The keys to the front door felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had access for 30 days. Time enough to complete what I'd started. I drove to the Starbucks on Peachtree Street and parked in the lot, hands steady as I dialed directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency fee would cost an extra $200, but money was no longer a concern. AAA Emergency Locksmith, this is Marie speaking. I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, ma'am? As soon as possible. I can pay cash. I can be there in 2 hours. Address. Back at the house, I waited for Marie in my truck, watching Mr. Johnson water his garden next door. He waved and I waved back, my chest tight with the knowledge that I was lying to everyone who cared about me. Marie arrived in a van full of tools and hardware, a woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency Atlanta had to offer. Security issue, ma'am? She asked, studying my front door. New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry. She nodded like she'd heard it before and got to work. I watched her remove the locks I'd installed 15 years ago. The brass hardware Thomas had picked out because it matched our door knocker. These are quality locks, Marie commented as she worked. Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them. That was me. I like things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Marie tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. Here are your new keys, ma'am. 3 copies of each. Front door, back door, and garage side entrance. Marie handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. That'll be $450 with the emergency fee. I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Lorraine Hayes to this transaction. After Marie left, I stood in my empty house and began the hardest part, packing 25 years of life into what I could carry. Thomas's watch went into my suitcase first, along with our wedding photos and the novel he'd been reading when he died, bookmark still marking page 247. My engineering certificates. Our important documents. Thomas's favorite cookbook with the handwritten notes in the margins. I left almost everything else. The furniture that told our story would have to stay. The photo albums chronicling Marcus's childhood. Thomas's clothes still hanging in our closet, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne. While I packed, I called Peachtree Towers Apartments on my phone, explaining that I needed a furnished 1-bedroom immediately. We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy, said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. Month-to-month lease if you prefer flexibility. I'll take it. I met Mrs. Chan at the apartment complex an hour later. A modest but clean building designed for seniors, with a community center and well-maintained grounds. The 1-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mrs. Hayes. When would you like to move in? Tonight. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. I signed the lease and handed over first month's rent plus deposit. Nearly $3,000 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading my car in the gathering dusk, I caught Mr. Johnson watching from his window. He waved again, and I felt the weight of all the relationships I was severing, all the connections Marcus and Jessica had forced me to cut. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where Thomas had taught Marcus to bake Christmas cookies. In the living room where we'd watched Marcus open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom where Thomas had taken his last breath while I held his hand. "I'm sorry, honey," I said aloud to Thomas's memory. "But you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good." I locked the new locks and drove away from Magnolia Drive for what might be the last time. My rearview mirror full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at Peachtree Towers, my car loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, I dropped my suitcase and immediately reached for my phone. The final phase of my plan required one more call, one more piece of the puzzle that would give Marcus and Jessica the surprise of their lives. The apartment felt like a motel room, functional but soulless, with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. I stood holding my phone, Thomas's photo already positioned on the nightstand, trying to decide which bank would best protect nearly $900,000 from the children who thought they deserved it. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching banks that specialized in large deposits. Georgia Community Bank caught my attention, smaller than the major chains, with a focus on personal service and discretion. Exactly what I needed. Georgia Community Bank. Private Banking Division. This is David Morrison. Mr. Morrison, my name is Lorraine Hayes. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. The brief pause on the other end told me David was recalculating his day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mrs. Hayes. When would be convenient for a consultation?" "Monday morning, 9 a.m. Perfect. I'll have everything prepared." The weekend stretched ahead of me like uncharted territory. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Thomas and I built together. This tiny apartment felt like exile, but it was exile by choice. My choice, not theirs. Saturday morning, I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and methodically unpacked my belongings. Thomas's watch on the dresser. My engineering awards on the bookshelf. Our wedding photo beside the bed where I'd sleep alone in a space that had never known Thomas's presence. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for one person. Simple meals, nothing that required the kind of cooking Thomas had loved. The checkout clerk, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I was new to the area. "Just moved in," I told him. "Starting fresh." Sunday morning, I discovered a coffee shop called Brews and Views 3 blocks from my apartment. The barista, a young man named James with a friendly smile, made the kind of strong coffee I preferred. "You're new around here," he observed, not prying, just friendly. "Retired engineer," I said, looking for a quieter life. "Well, you found the right neighborhood for that. Most of our customers are pretty mellow." I sat by the window with my coffee, watching people walk dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Saturday morning that Thomas and I used to treasure. But instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Monday morning, I dressed in my best suit and drove to Georgia Community Bank. David Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of professional warmth that came from handling people's life savings. "Mrs. Hayes, what brings you to Georgia Community Bank?" "I recently sold my house. I need a fresh start with an institution that values personal relationships over transaction fees." David nodded with genuine understanding. "We specialize in exactly that kind of service. Tell me about your needs." I explained my situation carefully. A widow who'd sold her family home and needed secure, accessible banking. David asked thoughtful questions, never prying beyond what was necessary for account setup. "I'll need to wire the funds from my previous bank," I explained. No problem at all. We can initiate that transfer today, and the funds should clear by Wednesday. David prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Online banking, debit card, and checkbook, all standard services. Given the amount, I'd also recommend our premium account package for additional security features. I signed documents that made me an official client of Georgia Community Bank, customer number 847293, with access to nearly $900,000 that Marcus and Jessica would never see. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the strange rhythm of my new routine. Morning coffee at Brews and Views. James remembered my order and asked about my weekend. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed pigeons and read newspapers. Wednesday afternoon, David called with the news I'd been waiting for. Mrs. Hayes, your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active. I hung up and looked around my small apartment, at Thomas's photo watching me from the nightstand, at the simple life I was building from the wreckage of my son's betrayal. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt truly in control of my own destiny. Wednesday evening, I sat in my single chair, not Thomas's reading chair, not the recliner where I'd heard Marcus's betrayal, just a plain chair in a plain room that belonged entirely to me. I opened my laptop and typed mini surveillance cameras into the search bar. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, knowing that what I was about to order would capture the final act of my revenge. Marcus and Jessica were returning on Friday, expecting to find their grateful old mother ready to be managed. Instead, they were going to discover that their burden had become their biggest problem. The search results filled my screen with dozens of surveillance options, from obvious security cameras to devices disguised as everyday objects. After 30 minutes of research, I found what I needed, a wireless mini camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger. The specifications were perfect for my engineering mind. Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control. Motion-activated recording. 12-hour battery life. Crystal clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone from anywhere with internet access. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $40 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $149, an amount that would have made me hesitate 2 weeks ago but barely registered now. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element. The note that would explain everything to Marcus and Jessica when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone. Dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful engineer's handwriting, the penmanship Thomas had always admired. Dear Marcus and Jessica, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm becoming a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account, where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Atlanta Moving and Storage on Peachtree Street. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Mom. Thursday morning, the FedEx truck arrived at my apartment with a small box containing my surveillance equipment. I spent an hour in my kitchen testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Thursday afternoon, I drove to my former house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I'd never given Marcus and Jessica, parking inside to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the front door with my new keys. Inside, the house still smelled like home. Thomas's cedar sachets, the lemon oil I used on the wooden furniture, the faint residue of 25 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my chest tight. Marcus and Jessica's suitcases by the stairs. Their mail scattered on the kitchen counter. Evidence that they'd been treating my house as their personal storage facility while planning my exile. I positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until I was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Thomas's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Thomas and I had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to Thomas's memory. "Justice served." I locked the house with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from my car, and drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the moment Marcus and Jessica discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 6:30 p.m. Thursday evening. Tomorrow Marcus and Jessica would return from their business trip, probably discussing their nursing home plans and already spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old mother had become their worst nightmare. I woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a woman about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing my empty former doorway. 4:30 p.m. They should arrive soon. I'd memorized their travel patterns. Marcus always insisted on leaving Dallas by noon to avoid traffic, and Jessica drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into my driveway within the hour. I looked at Thomas's photo on my nightstand. "I hope you understand what I'm doing, honey." They left me no choice. 5:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with motion detection. A black SUV, Jessica's car, pulled into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Marcus stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Jessica emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the front door, Marcus fishing his keys from his pocket while Jessica set the luggage down. He inserted his key into the lock I'd had changed just yesterday. The key didn't turn. Marcus frowned, examining his key ring. He tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird." His voice came through my phone speaker. "My key's not working." Jessica stepped closer, her expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." I watched her disappear around the side of the house while Marcus continued struggling with the front lock. When Jessica returned 3 minutes later, her face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote isn't working." Her voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Marcus, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Mom doesn't even know any locksmiths." Jessica studied the front door more carefully, her financial advisor's mind recognizing trouble when she saw it. "These are brand new locks. This isn't an accident." Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Mom." I watched him dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 3 days ago. After several rings, his face crumpled with confusion. No answer. "It's not even going to voicemail." "Try her cell phone." "She doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting her one for emergencies." His voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Jessica was examining the windows now, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "There, that one's unlocked. I can boost you up." I watched my son climb through the kitchen window I deliberately left unlatched, his business suit catching on the frame. He disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door opened from within. Jessica entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Marcus's hand trembled as he pulled down the envelope with his name and Jessica's written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands, as he tore open the seal. His eyes moved across my words, Jessica reading over his shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock to disbelief to horror. She sold the house. Marcus's voice rose to a near shriek. How could she do this to us? Jessica snatched the note from his hands, reading it again as if the words might change. That manipulative old woman. She was playing us the whole time. $890,000. Marcus was crying now, his composed business demeanor completely shattered. She kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future. Your future. Jessica snapped, her mask of devoted daughter-in-law finally slipping. This is your mother, Marcus. You should have handled this better. My fault. He whirled on her, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. You're the one who said she was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Well, she was a burden. Look what she's done to us. Jessica gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. We're homeless. Our lease expires next week. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make me homeless in their nursing home. Call a lawyer, Marcus said desperately. There has to be something we can do. She can't just sell the house without telling us. With what money? Jessica's voice dripped with contempt. In case you forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your marketing salary barely covers our car payments. Then get another job. Where do you think financial firms are lining up to hire advisors who got fired for questionable transactions? I watched my son's face crumble as he realized the full scope of their situation. No house. No inheritance. No savings. And Jessica's unemployable status finally revealed. How could she be so cruel? Marcus whispered. The same way you were cruel when you called her a burden and planned to warehouse her, Jessica shot back. The old woman was smarter than both of us. Through my phone screen, I watched them collapse into my old furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Marcus buried his face in his hands while Jessica stared at my note with the expression of someone who'd finally understood she'd been outplayed. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Thomas's favorite wine I'd saved from the house. A 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Thomas's photo. To you, my love. Justice served. The wine tasted like victory. They learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Probably Marcus trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Atlanta skyline painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my son and his wife were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 2 years since Thomas's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own woman again, with my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead like an open road. Lorraine Hayes had left the building, and she was never coming back.